Hello, political candidates. Your campaign's website domain is an important factor in your website's SEO. It's crucial for your campaign website to include your first and last name. It gives AI models like ChatGPT an authoritative source of truth to pull from, helping to prevent the AI from hallucinating or picking up outdated information from third-party blogs or partisan attacks. So visit name.com today and buy your personalized .vote website address. Let AI be your friend. Your potential voters will thank you.
Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chain disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com. To run a successful business, you need one thing: customers. And how do you get customers? You get them through advertising. You get them through lead generation. But what happens if the leads don't exist or they don't have valid contact information? This is a familiar story all businesses deal with. Then they call these leads who don't exist, or they're bad numbers, or they're not in their service area. Argus 101 verifies every lead before your team picks up the phone. It's a real person in your area and a neighborhood that matches your ideal customer. Your team only calls people worth calling, thus saving you money. Free trial at argus101.com. That's ARGUS101.com. Help your business expand today. Go to argus101.com. ARGUS101.com.
Welcome to Breaking Battlegrounds with your host Chuck Warren. I'm Sam Stone. Our first guest up today, Ethan Barton, is an editor at the Free Beacon, formerly with Fox News, and he covers everything Colorado, a state that is changing at an extraordinary pace. Ethan Barton, welcome to Breaking Battlegrounds.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Ethan, so, last night President Trump gave a 25-minute speech, which seemed to open a can of worms, as when he talks about elections. We know it would. What are your thoughts on his speech?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is seeing more of the records that he mentioned that were going to come out. We saw some of them, but they're heavily redacted. So I'd like to see what comes next. But ultimately, a lot of what we were seeing was him worried about securing the election, which I think is something that everyone should be worried about. We all want secure elections. I don't think that's a partisan issue. And at the end of the day, that's just something we're looking for.
Ethan, this is Sam. One of the things that jumped off the page to me in what he said was talking about Venezuela, because let's be honest, Nicolas Maduro would not have allowed any voting system into his country that he couldn't rig. So in terms of believability, that one was absolutely 100% believable.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too far into Venezuela because I'm just thinking about the elections here at home. We've seen problems with elections across the world. So when I'm really thinking about foreign countries, I'm thinking more about the influence campaigns that other countries are trying to do. We know that Russia has spent no shortage of time trying to influence our elections. That's proven across the board. I can absolutely believe that China is has been doing the same thing. Iran absolutely has been doing it. There's just no shortage of
absolutely. Evidence. Is there a big campaign? We're in Arizona, and we have a big campaign that there's indications it's being funded by China against data centers and tech companies essentially here. Are you seeing that in Colorado also?
I haven't seen that in Colorado, but there's no question that China's been they've been funding influence campaigns on anti-data center issues. They've been just funding all sorts of the influencers who have been pushing these anti-data centers, anti-AI efforts has all been straight from China. And they have a big reason to do that, right? Like the AI race is so important. And if China gets ahead, which they're starting to catch up to us, that's going to be a huge weakness to us. in military, in tech, in commercial, every sector is going to be a huge problem if they get ahead of us. So they have big reason to be pushing this internationally and especially here.
100%. All right, tell us a little bit for folks who don't know Colorado. I lived there, maybe about a decade ago, and it was a very purple state, very, sort of get it done state, right? Where people figured out a way to make government work. That seems to have just all completely broken down in the last decade. What's going on there?
Yeah, I came here at the end of 2022, so it was pretty solidly blue at that point. But there's no question, even the time that I've been here, it's quickly gone farther and farther to the left. Democrats have just really solidified their stronghold, and there's no indication that that's going to be going anywhere else. So at the end of the day, why wouldn't they be pushing harder and harder left policies and laws? And then you look at places like Denver. Denver is, it has a stronghold on politics here. And that's really just where we're seeing a lot of the heart of these liberal issues. Fort Collins, Boulder, all of these places. It's mirroring what we're seeing across the country in terms of increasing polarization. So the fact that Colorado was trending blue a decade ago, moving away from its purple direction, as liberals and Democrats took hold, we're seeing that happen across the country in places where Democrats and liberals are taking hold. They're getting more and more farther left. I mean, just look at New York City, for example. You had Eric Adams in the previous administration as mayor, and he was not particularly a liberal Democrat. But then Mamdani comes in, and he is about as far left a mayor as New York's ever seen.
Right.
And then in the primaries earlier in June, we had a whole sweep of full-on self-described socialists taking hold in the primary elections. So it's effectively it's mirroring what we're seeing across the country, just at a radical scale.
We're with Ethan Barton. He's an editor at Free Beacon. You can follow him on X at Ethan R. Barton, Barton. So for the first time in 20 years, Colorado had people moving out of state. You had 12,100 residents move out. Do you think this net? Yeah. Is this a reflection of what's going on politically in Colorado, you feel, or cost of living?
Probably a little bit of both. I mean, Colorado is definitely seeing an influx of people from places like Texas and California coming in, which is pretty interesting because obviously the politics in those two states are so distinct. But it tends to be people coming from California because they're tired of liberal policies, and people coming from Texas because they don't like the conservative laws in
Right.
Texas. So that's kind of interesting on the political side. The cost of living, less so the cost of living and more so taxes and jobs are, I think, the issue. We've seen a big loss of businesses here in recent years. Last year especially was a big loss for us. One of the biggest ones was Palantir. And that's a really interesting case because Palantir has such liberals have such a bend against it, and there are protests against Palantir regularly. There's just such an anti liberal bias against Palantir. Plus, when you add in things like corporate taxes, the difficulty of doing business in Colorado, of course they're going to move out. And when a business as big as Palantir moves out, then of course the jobs are going to go with it, and of course people are going to move with that. So I think that's a big reflection of what we're seeing in that.
So I want to get to the articles you've written, but I have this question, and it's more theoretical, but I think you'll have the answer. So when Sam lived there, he said it was purple. 25 years ago, it was a red state, right? Yeah, I think it was Governor Owens. He was quite conservative. Mm-hmm. Talked about a possible presidential candidate if it was not for his personal failings. My question for you is, as you've watched Colorado and you see what it's become now, do liberals and progressives really outnumber common sense moderates and Republicans in Colorado, or are the common sense moderates and Republicans just simply too lazy and not voting? And the second question is, what can be done to prevent this from other states? Because I don't see anything but Colorado just going downhill on these various issues.
Yeah, I'm going to start with your second question first because that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. So it's important to know that with Colorado, a big reason why it did go from purple to blue is because Democrats specifically targeted it. They saw an opening in Colorado and dumped money in, they dumped strategies in, and they really made a concerted effort to turn it blue. And obviously they succeeded. And then if we look at other states that are kind of in similar boats, I mean, we're seeing fewer and fewer purple states as time goes on. I think a good example to look at in where things are now is Virginia. Virginia is solidly a purple state still, but it's really, truly, I would say, the epitome of a battleground state right now. We had Governor Youngkin as the last administration, obviously a Republican, solidly Republican state at that point. And now we have Abigail Spanberger, who really made a concerted effort to bill herself as a moderate, and she really pressed that hard. She avoided addressing issues like the transgender issues in Virginia. Just really made it an effort to not have to weigh into some of the more far left or left wing policies of that Democrats tend to espouse. And since taking office, we've seen her just go full liberal. I mean, as liberal as you can be, endorsing a gerrymandering effort she promised she wouldn't take. Appointing far left Democrats across the board. We've written about that a ton at the Free Beacon. And so ultimately, I think that what we're seeing there is how we can confront it pretty well. Republicans have a pretty strong, not hold, but they have a strong playbook there that can counter these kinds of things. And I think as Democrats adopt more and more far left views, as we're seeing with Abigail Spanberger, I think that's going to be a good counter for Republicans. They're able to point to the things that she's doing, that other Democrats are doing, and kind of point back at that and say, like, hey, look, this is happening. I'd be surprised if we're not seeing a little bit of a yo-yo back to the right in Virginia.
Okay.
Because of that.
So then going back to Colorado, is there a donor base? Are there the number of voters to start pushing back against what's clearly a socialistic direction there in your primaries?
So I wish I had a more
I know it's not an easy question. It's not an easy question to answer. But I know you're writing about this. You probably think about it. And we got 2 minutes left in this segment, so don't feel free to carry on next segment. But I know you're thinking about it and you're watching it. So what are your thoughts?
So, I really wish I had a nice way to put this, but the Republican operation here is pretty weak. I mean, I reached out to the Republican Party at one point, just to chat as a reporter, and they more or less told me to get lost. And it was on an issue that really would have supported them. It was about crime stats that in Democratic held cities, with Democratic district attorneys. And I was really trying to dig into that, and when I hit them up, they were like, "No, we don't really want to talk to you." And I was like, "Dude, this is probably going to end up being a very favorable story for you." So they really just are not. Republicans here don't have much options, I think. There's exceptions to that, of course, but there's a lot of places where Republican voters are.
But here's the thing. So I'll give you an example. A good friend of ours is put on the ballot in Colorado. No boys and girls sports, banning transgender medical procedure for minors, right? And Sam and I talked to him and said, "You can get this done." He goes, "No, I can't get any donor money off Colorado." Well, guess what? They got all the signatures with volunteers. They're all on the ballot. So I know there's people there. So next segment, as we go into this, I want to know, is there a person out here who can start leading? Because literally, we've never had another state where it was all done with volunteers. They collected hundreds and hundreds of thousands of signatures.
And we can get into this, Chuck, because I still vacation in Colorado a couple of times every year, and I tend to go to southern Colorado around Cortez, where it is a very conservative area. They're just not mobilized and organized. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And there's a fear of trying to take on the Democrat money and the power establishment, and that seems... I don't know the situation in Denver and those areas, and we definitely want to get into some of that with Ethan Barton. We also want to talk about some of the stories he's written, because some of the things that these Denver area Colorado socialists are doing is just insanity. And we're going to have all of that when we come back here. So, folks, be sure you follow Ethan Barton on X at Ethan R. Barton. And if you're not already, go to breakingbattlegrounds.vote. Get signed up for our podcast. Make sure you get all that extra content each week. We'll be back in one moment. All right, welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. We're continuing on now with Ethan Barton. He is an editor at the Free Beacon, formerly with Fox News. Ethan, with everything going on in Colorado, you have some really bizarre stories coming out of there. I read through.
It's like a Netflix series.
So it absolutely is. You definitely could write a sitcom off of this stuff. Give us some of this. One of your pieces jumped off at me. The Denver socialist Milat Kiros says America must address attacks by reevaluating its relationship with Israel. I think they get everything exactly backwards, but tell us what that's about.
Yeah, that's a great example. So, as I'm sure most of your listeners know, there was a firebombing attack in Boulder in June 2025. Basically, Boulder is about 30 minutes north of Denver, northwest of Denver, and this guy came out. He threw Molotov cocktails at this group of this Jewish group that was protesting or rather marching to support hostages in Israel, Israelis held by Hamas. This guy throws Molotov cocktails and shouts "Free Palestine." Afterwards, he says he wanted to kill all Zionists. And then Milat Kiros comes out and she's like, "We don't know what his motive was." Well, I don't think it gets more clear than him saying, "I want to kill all Zionists," She said that October 7th was inevitable. She also said 9/11 was inevitable. But so she kind of got grilled after winning her primary, after making those remarks. She got grilled about October 7th a little bit. And basically what she said was, we need to figure out why this guy did these attacks, why he has this hatred for Israel in his heart, so that we can reevaluate our relationship with Israel. And I don't have a way of looking at that other than her saying, like, look, if we want the attacks to stop, if we want anti-Semitic and anti-Israel violent attacks, we've seen plenty of those. If we want those to stop, then we need to cut our ties with Israel. I mean, it's very much so victim blaming. I don't see another way to describe it.
Yeah, 100%. And this seems to be the theme. And look, I'm Jewish, so this hits home. This seems to be the uniting theme across the Democrat Party right now, at least on the radical side, is hatred of Jews and hatred of Israel. And the ability to use that effectively as a weapon in an election, that's a pretty extraordinary shift within the Democrat Party, even from a few years ago.
Yeah, I mean, that was absolutely a huge platform for Milat Kiros, that and just attacking the establishment. But it's not just her. Like, I mean, first of all, she rallied with Hassan Piker, the far left streamer who said that America deserves 9/11. She rallied with him, got a ton of support from him. He's also supportive of a lot of other anti-Israel candidates across the country. And then in New York, again, I brought this up earlier, there were three self-described socialists who won in the New York primaries for House races. And they've all expressed various anti-Israel views. Daria Liza Chevalier is maybe the prime example. I mean, some of the things she said is like, I know a lot of folks like to parse anti-Israel versus anti-Semitic, and there's no parsing it with which some of her comments.
No, they accuse Israel of being genocidal, but their view, their language on Israel is actually genocidal.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So tell us about Manny Rutinel. He is he's a Democratic nominee for Colorado's. It's a swing district, right? The 8th congressional district. Is that a swing district?
Yeah, very much so.
And he's written great pieces like "What Would Jesus Do?" Socialism and the 5 stages of becoming a vegan. Isn't that cattle country out there?
It is cattle country. Yeah. So he was a years long. I mean, we're talking like dating back to at least 2013. Vegan, very hardcore anti animal agriculture activist. And then he moves to Colorado 8, which has a huge ranching community. I think its biggest industry, basically all its money comes in from ranching. And when he got called out for it, he was like, "Oh, I wasn't talking about Colorado ranchers. They're the envy of the world. Everyone else is bad, but I was talking about just the bad apples." But I mean, we're talking like literally a decade of him like going on these attacks. He did the same thing with oil. He got arrested protesting at a Yale Harvard bowl game, saying that he joined protesters saying, "Hey ho, oil's got to go." Basically, anti-fossil fuel. He got arrested with a bunch of protesters. He has since said, "Oh no, I was a legal observer." But if you just look at his rhetoric over the years, like it's been very anti-oil, very anti-fossil fuels, and that district also has that's where Suncor is, which is a big energy supplier. Tons of oil comes in from there. So I'm not sure what his game plan is going forward, but he is just turning tail on that.
Well, let me ask you this. So, all right, so you have, I mean, it seems to me he is a ripe target if I am the National Republican Congressional Committee to start defining now. Is the NRCC or, Club for Growth or any of these groups in defining him in this competitive district? Because it seems like you could define him through the summer and probably win that district by 4 or 5 points. Do you see any outside spending from Republicans or conservatives targeting people and defining what this guy is?
Yeah, so right now there's a huge spending gap. Gabe Evans, the Republican incumbent there, he's got a massive spending advantage right now, which is great for him. But for Manny Rutinell, he is just raking in grassroots, and the Democratic operation has started pushing money into him and is starting to prop him up. They basically just announced, "Hey, we're going to put you up." So we can expect a close fight, even with all of his flip-flops over time, with his socialism, anti-meat, anti-oil, just attacking industries there. It's going to be a close fight no matter how much money the Republicans dump in. Let me give you a good example. Milot Quiros, she overtook her the Democratic incumbent who had been in Denver, the Denver representative, for 15 terms, 30 years, literally came to office the same year Milot Quiros was born. Huge spending. Diana DeGette had a huge spending advantage over Milot Quiros, and Milot Quiros won by 13 points. Like, that's not a close margin. So no matter how much money the Republicans dump into Gabe Evans' campaign or against Manny Rutinell, I don't think that's going to be, that might be an indicator of how things will go, but it's definitely not going to be the end all be all.
Interesting.
What do you see coming? We have just 2 minutes left. What do you see coming in the elections this year in Colorado? Which are Republicans going to be able to hold out those couple of key House seats that we need on our side to hold the U.S. House?
Colorado 8's the only one that I think is really, really in question. There's a few others that have been put on the board. I don't think those are as I see it right now, I don't think those are a question. I also don't think they're going to take anymore either. But Colorado 8 is going to be extremely contentious. We're going to see some real blood spilling over there. I hope not literally, I should say.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. We'll see some real barbs getting thrown around over there. I expect a really, really close fight, a really close election at the end of the day, no matter who wins. And I think it's anyone's race at this point.
Ethan Barton, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate having you on the program. Folks, follow his work at the Free Beacon or on X at Ethan R. Barton. Breaking Battlegrounds is going to be coming back here with more in just a few moments. We have Mike Gonzalez, senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation, coming up. You're not going to want to miss that. And Carrie Filippetti, one of our previous guests, covering all the issues in Venezuela. So stay tuned. We've got a ton of great content coming. If you are not already, make sure you go to breakingbattlegrounds.vote, sign up for that podcast, get that extra subscription. And the girls are here giving me the stink eye because I haven't yet said that you also need to give us a 5-star rating. Now I get a heart. See? My morning just got better, folks. If you give us a 5-star rating, you make women happy. That's what it comes down to. Breaking Battlegrounds back in just a moment.
To run a successful business, you need one thing: customers. And how do you get customers? You get them through advertising. You get them through lead generation. But what happens if the leads don't exist or they don't have valid contact information? This is a familiar story all businesses deal with. Then they call these leads who don't exist, or they're bad numbers, or they're not in their service area. Argus 101 verifies every lead before your team picks up the phone. It's a real person in your area and a neighborhood that matches your ideal customer. Your team only calls people worth calling, thus saving you money. Free trial at argus101.com. That's ARGUS101.com. Help your business expand today. Go to argus101.com. ARGUS101.com. Hello, Breaking Battlegrounds listeners. Did you know that private student loan debt in the United States totals about $300 billion? That's with a B. About $45 billion of that is labeled as distressed, which means people are behind on payments. Why Refi, who is a proud sponsor of our show, refinances this distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They don't even care what your credit score is. They provide you with a custom loan payment based on your ability to pay. Refi is not a debt settlement company. They work with each borrower individually to tailor a loan that meets your specific financial situation and helps you pay this loan off. So, folks, if you would like to learn more how to put your mind at ease and your budget back on track, call Refi at 877-400-9989 and tell them Sam and Chuck sent you. You can go and look into them at Refi, YREFY.com to get more information. They will help you reduce your monthly payment and guarantee interest rates under 6%, ensuring financial relief to you as you pay off your private student loan. Jump on that website or call them today.
Dear political candidate, listen up. I'm talking to you. YourName.vote should be the starting point of every campaign. It's memorable, looks great on signs and mailers, helps voters find you online, and gives AI tools a direct path to your campaign website. Why send people to a complicated web address when your name can be the address? Visit name.com today and claim your .vote domain.
Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chain disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com.
In today's digital world, standing out is more important than ever. Whether you're running for office, leading a cause, or hosting a vote for the cutest pet in town, you need a web domain that's simple, memorable, and action-oriented. You need a .vote web domain. It's clear, impactful, and establishes a lasting presence for your campaign. Don't wait. Head to GoDaddy.com or name.com, type in your name.vote, and get started today. Because after all, every pet deserves a web address that's as special as they are.
I think, Jeremy, we should just go ahead and switch the music because it's that time.
Murder, mystery, secrets untold. The truth gets set free when B gets a hold. Crimes where killers roam off free, or even ones where they get caught at the scene. From cold case files to headline news, she's breaking it all down just for you. So come take a seat, don't miss a beat. These crime corners where the stories go deep.
Okay, today's story is on Robert Durst. A little background here. He was born in 1943 out of one of New York City's wealthiest real estate families. His father built what became the billion-dollar Durst operation, and Robert was expected to inherit this family empire. Within the 30 years of Robert's criminal run, he had murdered 3 people but gotten away with it. This is an older story, but it has some really great clips to it. Once again, something viral. But Robert married Kathleen McCormick back in 1973.
Now, is that, given the family, is that McCormick of McCormick?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, he was just the one with the name in this situation. But he married her back in 1973. Their marriage was abusive and unstable. Kathleen was preparing to leave him, and on January 31st, 1982, she disappeared after spending their weekend with Robert. And Robert claimed he dropped her off at a train station and she was never seen again. Despite suspicion, there was not enough evidence to ever convict him and charge him, but people thought he did it. So many believe that because Kathleen planned to divorce Robert and expose him of just how weird he was, because a lot of his friends and family said that he was very intelligent, but he was very weird. And this comes to the next death, Susan Berman, one of his best friends. She later was missing after she had given the alibi to get Robert off for Susan's murder.
So he killed his alibi.
He killed his alibi because his alibi was getting questioned by the police. They reopened the case. This was like now in 2000.
And how did she pass away?
They never knew. She was found dead in her Beverly Hills house. Now, when she died in her Beverly Hills house, Robert sent a handwritten letter to the police letting them know that there's a dead body in this house in Beverly Hills. He spelled Beverly wrong. That's a very big point in this story. He spelled Beverly wrong. Very intelligent man, but didn't know how to spell Beverly Hills. So then, she was actually found shot in the back of the head. That was kind of it. The next death, though, this is the one where we don't have a lot of details on. He ended up Robert moved to this other part of New York in a bummy condo apartment near the bay. And in this apartment, he claimed to be an old woman living there. So when investigators were investigating the whole situation and doing interviews with the guy who was renting out the apartment, he pretty much was saying, she was a great tenant. What makes her a great tenant? The fact she never came around. But they would constantly see Robert, who was supposedly the tenant's brother, coming around to help with the property, but he was coming around to do some sneaky acts. And he ends up killing Morris Black. Now, Morris lived in the apartment complex as well across the way. He got caught because they found Morris's body coming up on the bay, and it's kind of sad. The investigator literally said, I have never stuck my hand down somebody's throat until removing this body from the bay, because it was just his torso, which then they later found bags of body parts. Now he gets caught. This is the biggest part of the story. He gets caught years later. They reopen the cases. They find a little bit of evidence on him. What got him convicted, though, he turned himself in on accident. He did an interview with HBO Max, like a very deep interview. It's an 8-episode segment, so check it out if you haven't. And at the end of the interview, they presented the letter that was sent to the police that was addressed to Beverly Hills, telling them that the body's in the house. And that same handwriting and letter, he had one addressed to his friend, to Beverly Hills, spelled the same way, Beverley. So that letter shook him up because he knew he just got busted years later. And he goes into the bathroom after this interview with the mic on his shirt, and he says, let me pull it up. I want to be word for word here. He goes into the bathroom and he says, what the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course. And they found that audio footage when cutting this.
Oh, that's amazing.
So they got him.
What's amazing about it is, I was just looking up, so the family's net worth was $8 billion, but he's such a weirdo. The family in 2006 bought him out for $65 million. Mm-hmm. He's like, I had enough of you. Here's $65 million.
I think they knew.
But I think that took care of the lavish lifestyle and his legal fees and so forth.
Oh, absolutely. I think $65 million would cover it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ladies, would you date somebody you knew his former wife had died under mysterious circumstances?
No.
All right. Well, that's the answer.
Yeah, they say that, but yet they're women. We know how this actually works.
Gang, we'll be right back with you here to talk about the Smithsonian and its wokeness. We'll be right back.
All right, welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Our final guest on the radio today, Mike Gonzalez, the Angelus T. Arredondo E Pluribus Unum, Senior Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. He writes on critical race theory, identity politics, diversity, multiculturalism, assimilation, nationalism, and foreign policy in general. And he has been covering the crazy report about what the direction the Smithsonian has been going. Chuck, I shake my head. I kind of saw this a few years ago when I went to D.C. and had a free afternoon and went in there, and I was kind of stunned. But Mike Gonzalez, tell us what's going on with the Smithsonian, because this is really kind of to me at least, it's a betrayal of what that institution is meant to be.
And that's exactly the right word. It's a betrayal. And thanks for having me on. For a year now, for over a year, the Trump administration has been writing to the Smithsonian. It has passed executive orders. It has sent the leadership letters telling them that they had to go back to sanity, that they could not use the Smithsonian as their plaything, as their instrument for wanting to change America. The administration said to the Smithsonian, we want to do an audit. Can you cooperate with us by sending us material? The Smithsonian said basically, no, we will do our own audit if an audit needs to be done. So the Smithsonian has been playing, no. And finally, what the White House has done, the council, the Domestic Policy Council, they issued a report that has all the information on one museum, the National Museum of American History. And it shows it's completely woke. It's the leadership. By the way, the report is 162 pages, 522 endnotes. It's full of evidence. It quotes the leadership itself. The leaders make clear in their own words that they see the museum and history itself as instruments of societal change. That is not what the Smithsonian was meant to do.
No.
Well, it seems like to me the whole purpose of the Smithsonian right now is denigrating America. It's sort of like it leads with the wounds and the flaws we've had, and then it wants to bury the good things about America, including our constitutional system, which allows us to make these corrections versus other countries. The thing that's scary for me on this, I was looking this up before our talk, 4 out of 5 high school teachers use Smithsonian educational resources. Explain to our audience. Right. Explain to our audience why this probably explains why our youth are trending towards socialism.
That's right. So 50 million people went to the Smithsonian last year. That was a bit down because of the prolonged government shutdown. But between 20 and 30 million students were reached through the Smithsonian's educational material. The Smithsonian, in other words, is very powerful. The Smithsonian has a large influence on how Americans see themselves in their history and their country and their heritage. So the Smithsonian cannot just be allowed to do everything that the leadership wants to do, because the leadership decides that it wants societal change, and it's sided with the people who want national tear down instead of national building up. So what is happening here is this is paid for largely by the taxpayer. 62% of its revenue comes from the $1.1 billion, billion with a B, that it gets from the U.S. taxpayer. It has a lot of resources from private donors as well. And this is not their plaything. This is not theirs to have. So what we're seeing right now is a hostile takeover of an entity that we already own.
And it's actually worse than just the materials that they're putting directly in teachers' hands that are going to the students, because you only have, I think now it's 3 major textbook manufacturers in the entire country, and all 3 of them heavily use Smithsonian resources for their social studies and history curriculum. So this is literally getting to every single student in the United States. That's
right, and we'll describe Washington as, because I've seen some of this material, as having been a bloody killer of Native Americans in upstate New York. It will describe other founders as slave owners, people who are very flawed. Look, you and I are not judged by our worst moments. Our worst moments are part of who we are, and we're accountable for them, and it's part of the story. But we're not defined by that. The Smithsonian wants to define America by its worst moments, and leave out the redemptive nature of how, for example, slavery was dealt with.
Well, and you know, you talk about Washington's early years in upstate New York. I'm in Arizona now, but I grew up in upstate New York outside Lake Placid. So we got kind of a pretty good dose of the history there. There were a lot of atrocities in the French and Indian Wars on both sides, but the outcome from that actually was fairly positive. In other words, you ended up with tribal nations there that ended up having solid relationships with the communities around them. That, you know, there's good history mixed in with bad everywhere we go throughout history, isn't there?
That's right, and all of that gets left out. I invite you and your listeners to go and see the educational material that they have on George Washington in upstate New York, and you will see none of the good stuff that you just mentioned.
And how broadly through the Smithsonian system do you think this is? Because obviously the report covers the Museum of American History, but when I went, the Museum of Natural History and some of those others, they've really infiltrated this into every portion of the Smithsonian.
This is an indictment of the entire complex, of the entire institution, all 21 museums. We say 21 museums. There's 19 that exist. 2 that have been authorized by Congress that are yet to be built, the Latino Museum and the Women's Museum. They cannot be built. These 2 museums cannot be built because already we know that they're going to be incubators for hatred of America.
How does that get reined in, especially with the current bent of the Democrat Party, where they're really leaning into this, frankly, massively distorted view of American history?
You win the battle of ideas, you win the political battles, and then you govern according to the promises you made.
So you've said the report is a call, or should be a call, for the Board of Regents to make some changes at the top with the institution secretary, Lonnie Bunch, and some of the other leadership. Can Trump or someone, how is the Board of Regents constituted first?
The Board of Regents is presided over by the Chief Justice of the United States. The Vice President is also there. The Vice Presidents don't always come to meetings. Kamala Harris, for example, never went to a meeting. Vance has gone to a meeting. And I think he's going to start going much more now. Then there are 6 political appointees, people from Congress, that is, from the Senate and the House, 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats. And then you have 9 citizen regions for a total of 17 members of the board, and you only need 8 for a quorum.
Okay. This strikes me, I mean, as you're telling me this strikes me as something Vance, I think, would do himself really, really well to just take on. It seems like he's not had that singular issue as a vice president. This is kind of a perfect vice presidential issue. At least it seems like it would be, wouldn't it?
And in fact, you're absolutely right. And the executive order from more than a year ago, from March of 2025, identified Vance as the point man on getting the museum to clean house. Now, you have to understand the vice president's a very busy man. He's right now trying to playing a leading role in Iran. But this is a very important issue. This is also a very important issue. Stanley Kurtz has a very good article in National Review in which he says, yeah, the economy and foreign policy are really important, but you lose the culture and you lose the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been, I think, it sort of underpins the conflict, right, between the old guard Republican establishment and Donald Trump and his movement. The MAGA, movement is fighting on those cultural issues.
That's right.
Is it one thing I'm big on doing that. I think that is absolutely essential right now. I think maybe much more than the economics. How do we stress the importance of that to people who don't understand what the left is doing culturally by changing institutions like this into ideological weapons?
Well, I write books about it, and I speak about it often every time that I can. I think that I think everybody's kind of like getting it now. Trump gets it. Trump came from the culture. Don't forget that. Mm-hmm. He had a very successful television show. Trump also grew up in New York. He grew up going to the MoMA. He grew up going to the if only because he was a billionaire.
Right.
And that's where the MoMA and the Guggenheim are two power centers in Manhattan. So he went to a lot of receptions there, and there's records of him going there. So as a young man, he collected Warhols. I mean, I worked for George W. Bush. George W. Bush was a great guy, in my opinion. I don't think he went to museums a lot. I think Trump, because of his upbringing, he gets the stuff.
Right. Yeah, he absolutely does. Before we let you go here, Mike, I wanted to talk a bit, because you'd mentioned the books you've written. Your last book, Next Gen Marxism, what is it and how to combat it? Because that's kind of what we've been talking about with Catherine Gorka. What is Next Gen Marxism for folks who don't yet understand the shift that's underway?
It's cultural Marxism. It's the idea that before you do revolution, or even without doing revolution, you take over the cultural institutions and you indoctrinate people into hating their country. And that's what the Smithsonian is doing right now. You wonder why people have voted for Zohran Mamdani. You wonder why people have voted for Katie Wilson in Seattle or Graham Plattner in Maine, and people who say that we live in a society that is structurally oppressive and systemically racist. It's because they've heard this in K through 12. They've heard this in university, and when they go to museums, they hear this and they see this, and they feel the Smithsonian is now, the way it's constituted right now, it's made to make you feel ashamed of being American. That is not to put a fine point on it, disgusting.
It's not only disgusting. I really feel like it robs children of the possibility of wonder, right? So I remember as a kid, we went there, I think it was in the 5th grade. We had a school trip. We went to D.C. We went to the museums. I came away with that, and I remember from our class, like, man, you came away with this sense of the impossible was possible here in America. It told the story of American exceptionalism through struggle, and to see that be thrown out, that is a really damaging cultural degradation.
That is exactly right. And I don't know if you remember, on July 4th, Mamdani had a speech in which he said they believe that America is exceptional because America is powerful and America is wealthy. Nobody believes that.
No.
Nobody who's serious about, who uses the word American exceptionalism in a serious context believes that. Yet somehow someone taught Zohran Mamdani, who became a citizen last week, someone taught him this, and nobody came along and taught him the story of natural right, which the museum, by the way, has nothing on.
Right.
Our National History Museum does not have an exhibit on natural right, which is what makes us exceptional.
This stuff's extraordinary. It's sad. I mean, it really does need to change, and we need to fight it. And I want to thank you, Mike Gonzalez. We really appreciate having you on the program today. Folks, make sure you're following Mike's work, because go get the books. We'll have the links up on our X site there. You can follow him on X at Gundisalvus, Gundisalvus. You definitely want to do that, and make sure you are following Breaking Battlegrounds on all your social media. Give us that 5-star review. Get it. Make sure you're signed up for the podcast. Get all that extra content we do bring you every week. We always appreciate having you. We will be back on the air next week. For the moment, Breaking Battlegrounds is out.
Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chain disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com.
Dear political candidate, listen up. I'm talking to you. Having an exact match domain like yourname.vote isn't a luxury, it's campaign basics. It's easy to print on yard signs and mailers, easy for voters to remember, helps people find you directly, and gives AI tools like ChatGPT a clear source for campaign information. So why settle for a long patchwork website address when you can own your actual name with a .vote domain? Visit name.com today and claim your personalized .vote website address.
Hello, Breaking Battlegrounds listeners. Did you know that private student loan debt in the United States totals about $300 billion? That's with a B. About $45 billion of that is labeled as distressed, which means people are behind on payments. Why Refi, who is a proud sponsor of our show, refinances this distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They don't even care what your credit score is. They provide you with a custom loan payment based on your ability to pay. Why Refi is not a debt settlement company. They work with each borrower individually to tailor a loan that meets your specific financial situation and helps you pay this loan off. So, folks, if you would like to learn more how to put your mind at ease and your budget back on track, call Why Refi at 877-400-9989 and tell them Sam and Chuck sent you. You can go and look into them at YREFI, YREFY.com to get more information. They will help you reduce your monthly payment and guarantee interest rates under 6%, ensuring financial relief to you as you pay off your private student loan. Jump on that website or call them today.
All right, welcome to the podcast portion of Breaking Battlegrounds. Folks, if you're not already, remember you can catch us on the radio each week, but if you're listening on podcast and you haven't yet done it, give us that 5-star review on whatever your favorite podcast format is. It really makes a big difference for this show, helps us reach more people and stay on the air to bring you great interviews like the one we have coming up right now with a regular guest and one we are thrilled to have as part of the program, Carrie Filippetti of the Vandenberg Coalition. She is the executive director there. Previously served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Cuba and Venezuela in the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs and Deputy Special Representative for Venezuela at the U.S. Department of State, meaning she knows a heck of a lot more about Venezuela than Chuck and I do, and probably vastly more than almost anybody in America. Carrie Filippetti, welcome back to the program.
Oh, it's awesome to be with you guys again. Thanks so much.
So what does the earthquake in Venezuela mean for its future and its government?
Yeah, I think so. For your listeners who maybe haven't been following it as closely, there were sort of what they call a doublet earthquake. So there were 2 different earthquakes in Venezuela, one 39 seconds after the other, magnitude 7.2 and 7.5, which is very high. It started what's known as a red pager alert, which is basically when the U.S. Geological Survey says this is the most intense that we see and could have serious implications for the people in the country. Unfortunately, they estimated that there could be anywhere between 10,000 to 100,000 dead. What we've seen since then is an attempted effort from the United States and other partners to really try to bring in humanitarian assistance to Venezuela. The regime has allowed the assistance to come in, but what needs to be remembered is that the people that are in charge of this regime are not only responsible for a very slow rescue effort, because they're trying to hide the true amount of deaths that we're seeing, but they're also responsible for the amount of death itself, because so much of the problems, the crumbling infrastructure, the lack of a FEMA type response is because they had underfunded these systems for many, many years. And we're now seeing the results of that. So to date, there's about 5,000 that have been discovered dead. There's close to 17,000 that are homeless, 16,000 that are injured, and about 20,000 that are still missing. And unfortunately, I think what we're seeing from the Venezuelan people is this is really making them very skeptical of the Delcy Rodriguez administration. And recent polling is suggesting that they're pushing for democratic reform sooner even than the rescue effort ends.
Is the U.S. doing enough to help with the recovery?
We're doing a lot. I mean, we sent over $300 million in humanitarian assistance. We did send some rescue workers from across the United States to assist in the rescue in Venezuela. That's really important because it also gives us eyes on the ground. And one of the things we've seen this regime do in the past is try to obstruct the amount of deaths so that they can keep those numbers lower. We already saw that they militarized some of the entry points to the most affected areas. So having boots on the ground, so to speak, is really important in this sense because we can keep tabs on what's going on. In fact, having American boots on the ground is how we were able to see that the Minister of Interior, Diosdado Cabello, was actually blocking humanitarian assistance from coming through. So we are doing important work, as are many other countries. I will say one of the big challenges here, though, is that we have thus far refused to really press Delcy Rodriguez to do more to actually assist in the recovery. And because of our continued endorsement of her regime, that makes it all the more challenging to get this transition going forward. So while the assistance, I think, is really beneficial, the problem is we have not yet politically made the calculation that needs to be made, which is that this regime is incapable really of leading and running this country. I do think that is going to be the clear conclusion at the end of this, as we see that they really can't mount the rescue or reconstruction efforts.
They're not a government. It's a criminal enterprise.
So I have two questions here. The first one is, we've sent $300 million in aid, correct?
Yes.
Explain to our audience where the government just gets this $300 million. Is there a fund set aside to help with emergencies like that? Explain to our audience where they get this $300 million.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things. And I will add here also that the one good thing is that in the past, the regime has refused any kind of humanitarian assistance. In this case, the U.S. government has been very emphatic that we are not letting any of this humanitarian aid go into the hands of this particular regime. So we do have oversight to make sure that that assistance is not being sort of stolen by the regime as they have in the past. But what we need to remember is that this regime already owed about $250 billion, close to $30 billion of that to U.S. companies in debt. This earthquake has caused about $37 to $38 billion more in damage. They do not have the ability to repay any of this debt. What's really interesting about that number, that sort of 250 plus now the 37 billion, is that makes it close to $300 billion, which is approximately the exact amount of money that the Maduro regime had stolen over the years, including when they were in the Chavez administration, from the people of Venezuela. So again, they're the ones responsible for the suffering that's happening now. The earthquake is one aspect of it, but they have really created the conditions for it to be as bad as it is. The other thing I would just add on this is one of the things that our service members have been doing has been trying to repair some of the airport facilities because a lot of the runways were destroyed by this earthquake. It's important to note that back in 2006 to 2015, there was an Odebrecht scandal, this big Brazilian construction giant, that they had paid basically $98 million to the Maduro regime in order to get contracts for operations to repair those runways. Of course, this was corruption, so those runways were never repaired. So actually, some of the damage that American service members are now risking their lives to address, the only reason they are the way they are is because the regime stole that money in the first place.
Let's go back to Delcy Rodriguez. I understand Trump's methodical approach to changing the government. How quickly do you think we can literally have elections in Venezuela where you're still having a functioning government, not a civil war in the country? I understand the methodical approach, but also we need to change government. What are your 2 cents on that?
Yeah, I think it's a tough question, and everybody has very different answers.
Yes.
Maria Corina Machado, who's the head of the opposition, she says that it can happen very quickly, within a matter of a few months. The U.S. administration has stated it will take a lot longer than that, somewhere on the order of maybe 2 years or so. My assessment is, look, at this stage, we already know that the elections under this regime are never going to be fully free and fair. So we can't hope for a perfect world, which maybe would take 18 months to 2 years to get to that perfection. But the interim government, or I'm sorry, the opposition was able to demonstrate that they had won the 2024 election, even despite all of the attempts at fraud. And so I think you could probably do it within, let's say, 12 months or so. The one thing that you have to be mindful of is there's a provision in the Venezuelan constitution that says there can't be any electoral reforms within 6 months of an election. So that kind of makes it a bit of a longer runway. But I would say a year to 18 months, it should not be any slower than that. And what needs to be done now is to declare that date for an election so you can work backwards to ensure that you're on track for that.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, Carrie, that I've been seeing and I kind of wondering about, it seems like for the level of devastation in Venezuela, this has just disappeared from international news almost overnight, right? Like everyone's sort of moved on.
But isn't that sort of the Trump world?
It is, but I'm wondering if there isn't. You usually see much more follow up than this, and I'm wondering if it's because effectively under the Chavista regime, this is not a country that exists in the world economy the way most countries of its size would. And so the impact isn't being noticed.
Right.
Right. I think it's partially that. I think it's partially the fact that, the Trump administration did make a really big bet on Delcy Rodriguez. And I think that's being proven to have been the wrong bet. I mean, if you even look at, you have to take some of these polls with a grain of salt, but if you look at recent polling in Venezuela, right after we removed Maduro from power, the Venezuelan people were hugely supportive of President Trump. He actually had the highest approval rating of any leader in the country, including Venezuelan leaders. He had close to 90% approval rating. Now it's dropping significantly. He's at about 50%. And I think it's somewhere on about 6% of Venezuelans say things are going well in the country right now. So we've seen a significant shift. And I think it can be a little bit of a challenge for the U.S. administration. They don't want this in the news because it shows that they put their bet and their cards in the wrong person's hands. And so I'm hoping that what this will mean is they'll recalibrate and realize, look, if we want Venezuela to be safe for American businesses, if we want to make sure that foreign terrorist organizations don't take charge of ungoverned territory, if we want to make sure we're stopping illegal immigration and narcotics trafficking, we really need rule of law in Venezuela. And that means supporting the opposition, supporting Maria Corina Machado, and making sure that we're putting in a quick timeline for those elections to take place as soon as possible.
So I want to get to Colombia. So Colombia is the latest example of basically a right-wing shift in Central and South America. What do you attribute this to? And, there's always the conspiracy online that isn't this interesting that this is happening since we got rid of U.S. aid and NGOs? I'd like your comment on that. But what do you attribute this rightward conservative shift in these elections in Central and South America?
Well, unfortunately, I might temper some folks who are excited about this, some of their enthusiasm, because just a few years ago, we saw this people noticed that there was what they called a pink tide, a leftward shift that turned socialism in Latin America. I think what we're seeing is that in both instances, you're seeing a rise in populism. So you have them elect a left-wing populist. That person ultimately becomes corrupt and doesn't deliver for the people of the country. So they say, to hell with this, we're going to go to the other side. They elect in a right-wing populist who unfortunately does the same. And then the next cycle, you'll see a left-wing populist come back in. So I think this is actually just kind of the cycle of Latin American politics that we can expect to see going forward. In terms of the NGO and USAID question, certainly I believe that there were a lot of reforms that needed to be made to these organizations. But one thing that I think is really a good story about what good work they did. I had the opportunity to go to Colombia to observe the elections this June, and I was there with an organization called the International Republican Institute, which was created by Ronald Reagan and is part of that NDI IRI kind of organization, hugely supported by US government. And what we were able to do was demonstrate that these elections did not result in any fraud. And that was important because the current president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, was really frustrated that his candidate had lost the first round election, which was unexpected. And he tried to spread a narrative of fraud that fortunately IRI was able to dispel. And I think that had an important role in making sure that didn't take off. So there are really good things that some of these organizations do. The narrative has obviously been about the things that should have been cut, but many of these organizations, I think, are continuing to do really important work for American security.
So what can we expect from Colombia the next 12 months?
Well, I think this is a really good news story for the Trump administration. Espriella, who is the new president, is very much on board with President Trump's agenda. He's very focused on changing what has happened in Colombia over the last few years of the Petro administration. We have seen an increase in coca cultivation to some of the highest levels in their history. Under President Petro, the UN had assessed that there was over 600,000 acres worth of coca cultivation in the country, which is astronomical.
That's a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean it's really unbelievable, and we saw some of the numbers of U.S. deaths related to cocaine increase as a result of this. So we know that Espriella is going to be focused on countering the drug traffickers, partnering with the United States on security cooperation, and really changing the narrative of decline in the relationship between Colombia and the United States. And that's important because they are one of our core economic partners in the region. They're one of our core security partners in the region. So I'm very hopeful that we'll see a much better relationship, which will result in a much safer America.
Are you more optimistic with the result of these elections, the direction for Central and South America and for the national security of the United States down there?
Yeah, look, I think what we have seen is that socialism doesn't work. I mean, obviously, Venezuela is the best example of this. You take a country that was once the richest country in Latin America, and then today, close to 95% of the country lives on less than $3 a day.
Jeez.
So that is the promise of socialism, right? Everybody's equally poor. Everybody's equally in shambles. And so I think what we're starting to see is the people of these countries hopefully realizing that despite the promises that socialism makes about making their lives better and making things more equal, that they simply don't deliver. That being said, as I mentioned before, it's really important that these new governments come in and really do respond to the people and to the needs of those people, including providing security. This is why Bukele in El Salvador is one of the most popular leaders in the region. He has had some very strong, in some cases, authoritarian tactics, but the people continue to love him because he has provided for their security. So if Espriella can make sure that the people of Colombia feel safe and secure, I think that's going to be an important step towards ensuring that these types of leaders continue to get elected.
Bukele has done kind of what I've thought South America as a whole needed to do for a long time, which is we have organized crime here in the United States. They have organized crime in Europe and Asia. The dividing line with those and a lot of South American organized crime has been that the boundary in all of the other societies is, no one really bats an eye when they're going after each other, but limiting actual public, public incidents of violence against civilians. Is that a track that could be possible across South America? Because it seems like if you could even get that far in putting down the cartels, that you change the entire economic dynamic.
And I think this is what President Trump really wants to do. In his national security strategy, he really highlighted security cooperation with these countries, targeting transnational criminal organizations, declaring many of them foreign terrorist organizations. We saw it wasn't just the earthquake news that came out of Venezuela. President Trump's administration also did a drone strike against the leader of Tren de Aragua and effectively killed him. And so it's clear that this is a key priority for the president, and he wants our regional allies to be partners in this. This was the purpose for what he created a few months ago, I think back in February, the Shield of the Americas, which is basically a new aggregation of regional partners focused on law enforcement cooperation to target these cartels. So I do think that this is a potential new pathway. I think all of the leaders of these countries really need to do effectively what the United States does, which is balancing that security and making sure that we're putting people in prison who need to be put in prison with the fact of making sure that we're not just rounding up a bunch of people and throwing them away, and making sure that we're not doing any reforms that sort of take us a little bit too far. We've seen this in Bukele's administration looking at constitutional reforms, and that I think it's important to focus on the security aspects, but also continue to retain the rule of law in these countries.
Carrie, last question before we let you go. You received a degree in religious studies from the University of Virginia. How has that degree helped you in your current career?
That is such a good question. It's helped me a lot. I would say that the two strongest ways are, one is really understanding that foreign policy is not just about grand strategy. It's about individuals and what individuals believe. Their beliefs will motivate their actions, and approaching it from that kind of psychological perspective was something that I got from my degree in religious studies. I also think the ethical piece, trying to always conduct foreign policy with an eye towards virtue and fulfilling sort of America's mission as being this shining beacon on the hill is really important, giving me a sense of, security is very important, but we preserve our security by preserving our virtue as well. And so that kind of ethical understanding, I think, has been especially important in DC, where maybe not all the time people are thinking about the ethical side of what their choices are.
Well, Carrie Filippetti, thank you so much for joining us. How do folks follow you and your work?
They can follow us on either Twitter or I guess it's called X, at Vandenberg Co. I'm not a big social media person. I think it's a huge rot in society. So my only one is LinkedIn, but people can find me there as well.
Carrie, thanks a million. We look forward to having you on soon. Folks,
thanks so much.
Folks, this is Breaking Battlegrounds. You can follow us breakingbattlegrounds.vote. We'll be right back with Gary Gigi and talk about your personal finances. Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds for our final segment with Gary Gigi, our good friend. He's president, CEO of Gary Gigi Capital, or just Gigi Capital, but we'll call it Gary Gigi so people remember the name. It's branding. It's all branding, Gary. How are you?
That's right. Good. How are you guys?
Good. So our Fed Reserve Chair visited Congress. He said he had no tolerance for high inflation. What does that mean?
This is so refreshing, you guys. I've been doing this a long time. And so most of our Fed chairs have been what I call Keynesian economists, and which means that when they see problems in the economy, they want the government to solve that problem. War seems to be what's called a supply side economist, which means he relies on the private sector. And this is so good to hear that when there's problems, then he's going to be looking at the private sector to solve that problem. We haven't had this for a really, really long time. It's so refreshing. He said that he and his, Fed associates are going to deal with inflation. And when he's talked about inflation in the past, he's talked about how inflation comes from government spending too much money, the Fed printing money, the Fed buying it. And so there's certain things that he can control and certain things he can't. So one of the things that he cannot control is what's called fiscal policy. That's whatever Congress does with tax rates, and he's staying out of that lane completely. I love that. Past Fed chairs tended to get way too involved with things that were not their business. I remember Chair Powell was getting into DEI policies with the Fed. All of us hated the Fed getting into that because it's none of their business. So Warsh is like an old-fashioned type of Fed chair that we haven't had for a while, that says my lane, my only lane, is inflation and full employment. Right now, full employment seems to be good. Job market solid, and so now he's looking at how do I bring inflation down. And so the one thing he can do is reduce the size of the Fed's balance sheet. So in the past, the Fed had bought a lot of bonds in order to try and bring down inflation. He doesn't seem inclined to want to do that at all. I love that. If he shrinks the balance sheet, that's good for the economy. That's good for interest rates. Inflation will come down. So he is the right guy at the right time, for sure.
So 2 questions. Who was the last chairman like Warsh who said, look, high inflation is my objective, full employment? Who was the last one that had that narrow focus?
Probably Greenspan.
Okay.
So I know that Powell, Yellen, and Bernanke before him, they were all three way too involved with whatever the president wanted to do. and in most cases it was Democratic presidents that they were listening to. Greenspan really seemed to be an independent guy. He took pride in trying to speak in a way that would confuse reporters, and it made us all laugh the way that he did that. But probably Chuck Greenspan is the one that harkens back to the type of guy that Warsh is.
When you talked about, Gary, at the open, the difference with Warsh being a supply sider versus a Keynesian, fundamentally, that's really about looking at this in his job from the opposite lens. The people you just mentioned looked at it from the lens of what's good for government. He's looking at it what's good for Main Street.
Couldn't have said it better, Sam. That is completely right. In that, going into this meeting, everyone was like wondering how he's going to react to questions, and he just dodged. Well, dodge is probably not word. He deflected them in terms of saying, "You're trying to get me to be political. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay in my lane." And so, going into this meeting, everybody was worried about whether the Fed's going to be raising interest rates or not, because inflation had ticked up because of the war. This week we had wholesale inflation and also consumer inflation, both of which ticked down. That's disinflation. And so now that begs the question, is the Fed going to raise interest rates at all? I don't think so. The data is saying that inflation may have peaked. And if that's happening, inflation's coming down, there's no need to raise interest rates unless something changes. And so this was a really good week for free market economics and inflation coming down. A Fed chairman who was listening to the private sector and the financial markets. This was a great week.
I've got kind of an odd question for you, Gary, because I think generally, obviously, everyone prefers the stock market to keep going up.
Sure.
We've seen a little in the last couple of days, a little dip around a cooling around some of the AI stocks, the tech stocks, chip stocks, those things. Mm-hmm. Given the timing at this moment with what's going on with Iran, with the need to continue to cool inflation, is it maybe going to turn out to be a good thing to have a little pause in the heat in those industries?
I hope so. So Sam, they have had particularly stocks that are around the AI sector have had phenomenal gains. Some of the chip companies are up, 100, 200% this year.
Mm-hmm.
That is not sustainable. That is not like a normal environment. So if the market takes a pause, pulls back a little bit, I think that's a buying opportunity.
Yeah.
Because the job market is solid. Inflation's coming down, which means interest rates are probably coming down as well. I'm bullish on the markets, bullish on stocks, bullish on bonds. I'm bullish on all of that right now, because if interest rates come down, that's good for bonds. If interest rates come down, that's good for stocks. So essentially, I like everything that's going on in terms of the market. As an investor, as a financial manager, I like what I'm seeing. And if the market pulls back, I'm going to be buying.
Last question before we let you go.
Sure.
Well, first two. Don't you just love the little trivia about, our former Fed chair, Greenspan, taking 2-hour daily baths to write his speeches and rest his back?
I like stories like that. Yes, I do. I think.
Yeah, he literally started at 5:30 a.m. had an hour to 2-hour hot bath. And he wrote his speeches and economic reports. Anyway, I always found that very interesting about him. I would have ink everywhere. But here's my question, and obviously, folks, Gary cannot give financial advice over the radio. But if you're investing right now, what would you be? What are some areas or some industries that people should be looking at right now?
If someone is not that involved with tracking the market, but they want to have some money invested, then the S&P 500 index fund is such an easy layup, and just dollar cost money into there, and then you can't go wrong. But if you're looking at specific sectors, I think that healthcare looks interesting. That could have a rebound. Materials, because the things that are in materials are building factories and
right.
Various things across the country. Technology is always something to be looking at, but you have to be very selective there.
Well, Gary, thank you so much for visiting with us today. How do people follow you and contact you?
Great. So website, gigicapital.com. That's GYGICAPITAL.com. They can always call us at our number, which is 801-787-0342.
Great. Gary, thanks a million.
Have a good weekend, guys.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much.
Folks, this is Breaking Battlegrounds. You can follow us at breakingbattlegrounds.vote, Substack. Listen, give us a 5-star review. If you don't, Brendan comes to your house. This is the new direction we're taking on the show. 5-star review. We appreciate it.
Remember, Brendan is studying murderers.
Yes. She's an expert
just
now.
keep in mind, this woman is literally studying murderers right now.
And Brendan, would you recommend the Alan Greenspan 2-hour-a-day hot bath in the morning?
100%.
Yeah, little candles.
100%.
So we'll go from there. So folks, have a fantastic weekend. Please share our show. We'll be back with you next week. Take care.